Hello, everyone. I am just going to allow 5 minutes to have more people join, and then we will officially start our webinar. I think we are collecting, and as people join, they'll find us on the way. So we are going to start with our talks. Welcome to SeritiTALKS, a platform that brings together development practitioners, communities, academics, policymakers, funders, and other stakeholders to share knowledge, ideas, and experiences. I am your host, Millicent, and today we'll be talking about building foundations, a parent's role in school readiness. Joining us today is Linda, with over 40 years of experience in the ECD sector, and Rebotile, the program lead of Bapaleng. Welcome to SeritiTALKS. Hi, how are you guys doing?
Good morning, everybody. I'm well, thank you. Very nice to be here and have a chance to share and chat with you all.
Okay, thank you. Before we dive into everything, I just thought, let me remind you, today is World Read Aloud Day. So parents, caregivers, please dedicate some time to reading books to little children in your community, in your complexes, at work, at home. Please do try to be part of the movement and read a book to foster the culture of reading. Before we dive into today's discussion, please note that this webinar is recorded and it will be readily available on our website in the next 3 days. So don't worry, everything we are sharing today will be available online for you to download and revisit this. So today we're doing it with a little bit of a spin, and before we get into our our talk, I would like for Linda to just define for us what school readiness is and the importance of us as parents and caregivers to play a role in preparing our little ones for school.
Thank you very much. I think the first thing we need to know is in South Africa, going to school does not depend on school readiness. You don't have to pass a test to get in as you do in other countries. And educators are meant to be able to adjust to the needs of individual children. But we all know too that certain knowledge and skills help children to benefit much better from what is offered in early schooling. And we also know very sadly that many schools, especially those attended by disadvantaged children, might have very overcrowded classes. I think recently we were talking, just because school week started, with classes of 50 children of 5 in grade R is really, not easy for anyone to deal with or be responsive. And they often don't have good resources. So there are there are many definitions of what children need for school, but I mean, the real bones of it is to be able to benefit from what is offered. Children, first of all, need to feel confident in themselves. They need to be able to get along with other children and adults. It's really important they can just be able to communicate and express themselves clearly, and to be able to pay attention and follow instructions. And those are possibly the most important, but it's also useful if they've had some exposure to content, such as some numbers, some print, that sort of thing before they go, so that it's not all entirely new to them. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think we now have a base of what school readiness is, and I'm going to give Linda some time to just go through the presentation, talk on a few pointers, and then we'll come back to the open discussion. You are more than welcome to type in your questions, queries, and compliments in the chat box. Linda, are you ready?
Yeah.
Great.
So I think just to say, when I put this together, I thought it was very important to frame why what the Seriti program is doing is so important. So I focused a lot on that. So I think, first of all, remember last year there was a great flurry of concern because most grade 4 learners couldn't read for meaning, which was worse than many other countries in the world. Then in 2022, there was a big national study, and they found that only about, less than half of 4 to 5-year-olds who were already in an early childhood development program weren't on track to benefit from grade R. And quite a lot of that was emotional and social unreadiness. And then we just know that children, there are advantages to being in an ECD program, not when you're very little, but when you get to be 3 or 4. But children who are not enrolled are therefore likely to be even worse than the ones who are in. And we know that children from low-income families are the least likely to attend ECD programs either because they're not available in their area or because they can't afford the fees. So essentially, the message is we need to start much, much earlier to improve learning. Okay. And this obviously involves the family. So I just thought this is a graph, which it's quite an old study, but very interesting. And what it shows is that how quickly the brain develops. And before birth and in the first year, there is more brain development for language and sensory development than at any other time in your life. So, we need to be looking after pregnant women, and we also need to be stimulating children from the moment they're born. Then as they get older, you'll see really by the time they're 3 or 4, they've also peaked in terms of their thinking skills. It doesn't mean that we don't go on developing, as we all know from our own lives, but these are times when children are particularly receptive. And so early means early, is what we often say. Next one. Yeah, so there are many factors that affect how children, what their learning outcomes and social outcomes are. And I mean, among the most important, obviously, is nutrition. And that would be both your pregnant woman's nutrition and the child, and a warm and loving relationship, good environmental conditions. So the care setting. And sometimes we will find that social and cultural factors may not be that helpful for preparing children for school because of ideas about, what children should be able to do and what they can't. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. So all of these things come together. And yes, there will be biological things. There are, you know, a small percentage of children who do have particular developmental delays and difficulties, but really the environment is absolutely critical. Next one.
Oh, sorry.
So these are just in brief, I've already talked to them, some of the things that are particularly concerning, you know, so if maternal nutrition and substance abuse during pregnancy is a problem, malnutrition is a huge issue, not having proper health care, sanitary conditions in the like water and sanitation, which also then not only cause illness, but often are very related to stunting and not growing to the correct height for your age. But the things that we could most likely impact upon through the kind of program that Seriti is offering here, which Rebel will talk to, is helping children as parents to understand what sort of stimulation they need for when they go to school, and helping support parents to be more affectionate and responsive to children. So those are really the kind of bones of this intervention as I see it, but we'll hear more in due course. So next one. Yeah, so I've already talked a little bit about what's important for school. So I would say that what we call these days executive functioning, which has really got to do with thinking type skills, being able to pay attention and focus, remember instructions, and be adaptable is really, really important, to think flexibly. Math skills, I think most parents, if you ask them, would think that school's about counting and writing and reading. So introducing ideas about number and quantity is important for later academic development. And most important, early literacy would be having a good vocabulary, being able to speak, being able to listen and follow instructions and so forth. Less important to know some letters, but nice if they have some exposure, like to writing their name and so forth by the time they're 5. And then the thing that makes possibly the biggest difference is children being confident about themselves, being able to get on with others. And particularly important, as you would imagine, for teachers is being able to manage conflict and setbacks without getting aggressive and hitting out. Oh, and one thing that grade R teachers often say is that they would really like every child coming into grade R to be able to go to the toilet independently, which you can see when you have these huge classes is really important. I think, is that the last one, Millicent, or is there another one here?
The other one, it's the activity that we will get into once we have had our short discussion, just to give people some time to digest all this information and just
Okay. All right.
immerse in it. So I just wanted us to touch a little bit. You spoke about the 2022 General House Survey and the presentation on ECDs, saying that children they do not have access to early learning programs. And I just thought maybe let's talk about that. What is the impact of the absence or the lack of early learning programs into formal learning? What are these kids missing out on?
I think, well, if you look at what's there, and let's be honest, it has to be a good quality early learning program. And the Department of Basic Education is very concerned about the poor quality of many, where they're simply just looking after children and they're not trying to get them involved and stimulated. But obviously there would be social and emotional skills that you get from working in a group, exposure to other adults. I mean, I was very surprised to find out in some of the work we've done, how many children, because of safety issues, never really get to mix with other children and adults. They're kept at home a lot in many communities. Then also you'll get exposure to all the skills, like a bit of counting, number knowledge, a focus on print, being exposed to some books, conversations and vocabulary. and the kinds of games that help children to learn your executive functioning skills. And that's
Okay.
why DBE is trying to introduce longer term, at least 2 years of pre-primary, so a year before grade R.
Oh, interesting. That would be great. Because we already have a triple R grade that they do in kindergarten. So I'm assuming if they're adding a few more years, then it means the schooling will be much longer. It seems to be like there's an absence of this traditional early learning programs, and I know that other role players are bridging the gaps. Programs like Bapaleng, I know that's what we do. Rebotile, can you give us an overview of what Bapaleng is, what we do in those communities, and how do we align some of our activities with early learning?
Thanks, Millicent, and thanks to Linda for the comprehensive introduction to the topic. Bapaleng is a parent and caregiver program, and the premise of our program is, as Linda said, in South Africa, school ready doesn't mean you've passed a test. And the reality is that some of these children don't have access to some of these resources they require. So the relationship at home with the parent becomes significantly important in helping children to develop some of these skills ahead of going to formal schooling. And through the program that we implement, we try and bridge this gap. And how we do this is we host what we call active learning workshops for our parents and caregivers in our communities. And really the intention is to empower them with some of the information and knowledge they may require to develop these learning relationships with their children, but also develop themselves as responsive caregivers in the home. And I think also to debunk the myth of formal learning as something that requires instruction, right? It's for parents to understand that every little thing they do or interaction they have with their children is actually an opportunity for their children to learn and develop a certain skill. And that sets them up for later learning. So in addition to some of these things, at Bapaleng, we support our families and our parents through household visits. We also do activations, or what we call awareness campaigns in our communities. That is at key points of engagement, like clinics and schools. Like Linda mentioned, we need to start taking care of our pregnant women. So the information we share through Bapaleng is really channeled to doing that and supporting parents with young children to become more empowered and capacitated. Yeah.
Okay. Linda, do you have anything to add? You are on mute, Linda.
Sorry, thank you. I think that the program is ticking a number of the boxes of threats, and that's really good because there's also an enormous shortage of parenting programs. And I like the fact that not only are you focusing on, the home learning environment, which is essentially a big driver of school readiness, but also on your linking to other services that will put the child in a better position to benefit.
Okay. Ribu, you spoke about debunking this idea that learning needs to be very formal. It needs to be kids taking instruction and doing something. So can you tell us how the Bapaleng program can capacitate a parent who says, I want to help my child, but I myself, I didn't go to school, I didn't complete school, I don't feel confident in my ability to prepare my child for school. Then how does Bapaleng come into play to say during this home visits to say to a parent, these are the ways that you can help your child with early learning, even if you as the parent did not further your studies?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think at the heart of Bapaleng, which is also evident in its name, Let's Play, is preaching to parents that the language that comes most easiest to children is play. And play in its nature is about freedom, it's about being able to explore, it's about adventure, and creating these small moments in our home environments for our children is actually already us as parents facilitating their early learning. And I think through Bapaleng, with us sharing our content where we really look at the child holistically, we look at, sharing information with parents on physical development, socio-emotional development, what happens during the first 1,000 days, why that's such a critical point in development. We look at cognitive, development, and we really try to make that information relatable to the everyday parent who does not need to have went through formal schooling themselves to share that information or that knowledge. And I think maybe to add to that is to say, building the confidence of parents as well in their own indigenous knowledge and wisdom is also key to facilitating this relationship and creating these opportunities for learning in the home environment. I think, like you were saying, how does Bapaleng do that? The key thing is we share our information through the workshops, but we also have our info sheets that contain all this information for our parents to have reference to.
Okay, and I think we will add a link directly to the Bapaleng page where you can get all these free resources to help you on this journey. I am just going to open the floor for a minute or two just to ask students to read through the chat and see if we have any questions that we need to answer right now before we continue. Student, do we have anything?
Thanks, Millicent. So we have a question from Jessica. She says, what are some quick wins practically that we in the ECD space could implement into programs with parents to encourage early reading and emergent literacy?
I think I will leave these questions, to our experts. So between Ribu and Linda, you guys can go in and, just give them a quick response.
Rebo, why don't you start, as you do have a literacy focus?
Yes, I think with Bapaleng and us implementing the program, one key thing that we've seen is the power of collaboration and partnerships. Because the truth is, we cannot be jack of all trades. And I think we draw a lot on the material and the resources that we also have access to through our partners. But I think maybe to add to that is, how do we tailor it in such a way that speaks to the everyday life of the parent? So I think for Jessica's question, I'll use them as an example at Dumo, where nutrition is a focus, and that's a thread that runs through everyone's lives daily, especially parents. So how do we use nutrition to bring in the aspect of reading about food and health and other aspects that may be relatable or relevant to parents in their home? I think that's what has come to my mind on that question. Thanks. Linda, I'll take it over.
Not a lot more. I think to pick up on points that both you and Millicent have made, first of all, I think there's so many parenting programs which sail in and tell parents what they should be doing instead of, as you say, listening to them, finding out what they are already doing. I mean, one of the classic language things is the tradition of storytelling, which is almost disappearing. I mean, children learned a phenomenal amount from sitting with their grandmothers and being quizzed on the stories afterwards, and getting a love of stories and words. I think also, your point about making it part of people's life. I mean, parents are busy. They also do traditionally think, many of them think that children should be doing chores and things like that. And they don't have, so parents don't have time. And then there are these strange ideas that have crept in, that, you have to buy expensive toys for children to be able to play, rather than, the children always find something to play with. And it's more that interaction and playful attitude that matters.
Okay, so I'm just going to put some pictures on the screen, and then as the audience, please look at the pictures and try to find learning opportunities on those pictures. And there's also a poll that is up. Please also participate in that, and then we'll talk on the results in a few. So you can choose whichever picture that the poll is up. You can also just choose whichever picture that you want to focus on, and just identify the learning opportunities, and please write your responses in the Q&A or in the chat, and then we'll come back to them. I'm just going to give you guys like a few minutes to vote on the poll, and then we'll discuss the results, and then we're done with the poll. We come back to the find the learning opportunities using the images on your screen. I hope you guys are casting your votes on the poll, because whatever you guys say now will tell us if you're on the right track, if everyone is engaging and can understand what it means when we talk about school readiness, early learning programs, and things that you can do as a parent or as a caregiver. I will ask students to tell us the results once they are ready, but I'll also just give you a few more seconds to just vote. The results are coming in. The results are popping in. Interesting results I have in front of me. So the poll question says, all children need to be school ready or they will not cope with the demands of formal schooling. 85% said true. 15% said false. And I'm going to need our experts to give us the correct answer and then deliberate on why the answer is the correct answer.
Mhm. Thanks, Millicent. I think, there is no right or wrong answer. And I think that's been what we've heard even throughout our presentation from Linda earlier, is that there are certain things that kids will be required to know, or certain skills they are required to have. But I think for this poll in particular, we had said the answer is false, because the truth is that school readiness is actually a process. It's not a single moment where we can say, oh, this child is ready, because some children will be well developed in some areas and some may be less developed in others. And it's really about what we are saying, that all stakeholders, parents, caregivers, ECD practitioners, then come to the fore to support this child, to create an environment where they can then learn to develop the other areas that they need support in. Thanks.
Okay, very interesting. I think I was team two. I just thought, okay, if they're not ready for school, no, they're not going. But then you get to learn these things, that it's a process. It's not you don't write a test and you determine if they're ready for school or they're not. I want us to get into these two images and to just identify some of the learning opportunities that the kids can get. Linda, maybe just go through the first one with us, and then we'll compare to see what the audience is saying, and then with what you've identified.
So are they writing this in the chat, Millicent?
Yeah, they're supposed to write this in the chat group, but I was thinking while we wait for their answers, we can just deliberate on the pictures that we see, and just kind of give parents also tactics of, if you're in the home and these are the things that you're able to do, this is how you can incorporate the teaching.
So these pictures talk very much to some of the things that there was a big study UNICEF did last year, which looked at some of the things parents wanted. And so if parents want children to get engaged in chores, that can be done and still learn. So you can see, so that's one of the reasons we chose these. I think also parents, you can see, and household members are busy, but the children are around and learning from them. And I guess, traditionally children learned a lot by watching adults as well. And none of this is expensive. It's all stuff that's already there. So that's one of the reasons I thought these pictures were good examples of how you could use your daily things to involve children.
Okay. Rebu, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think when I saw this picture in the presentation, I said to Linda, I'm like, gee, I found it odd that she used one where they're doing laundry, because I always use this as an example when I speak to people to say, I think demonstrating to parents the key role they play in children's development and early learning is as simple as making them see that their daily routine and activities are so important in teaching children some of these important skills. So, you know, I always make an example of teaching a child to hang laundry. You know, are you teaching them emergent literacy and numeracy skills? Because clothes have different colors and there's X amount of items in the basket, you know, so it's really that. It's saying you don't need to make separate time to go and sit with your child for them to learn, but actually you can build a relationship with them and at the same time teach them.
Okay. All right, thank you. Struan, do we have any learning opportunities identified in the chat group?
Thanks, Millicent. We have a comment from Kamena. She says the pictures also illustrate that the importance of quality face time with parents.
Is that all we have with regards to the learning opportunities?
Yeah, so I just encourage our attendees, please share your comments or questions either in the chat or in the Q&A.
All right.
And in the meantime, I do have a question for our presenters.
Okay.
How do these activities help with like learning objects or words for things?
Linda, can I give that one to you?
Are you going to give it to me? Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about, you know, obviously it's not exposure to books and print, which is something that's very important and hard to get. But yes, I mean, just to go back to Rebo's points about, you know, when you can sort the washing, you can count the things, you can sort the colors, the types of things, you can have a conversation about, you know, when do you wear this and what do you wear when it's cold. You could talk when you with your dad or your uncle, whoever that is, about how things grow and what they need to grow. So you'd be developing your knowledge of not only the words, but how the world works, which is one of our big curriculum areas. And I just love that, you know, this child very helping so that they're feeling competent and participating, as well as that quality time that Kimena talked about.
All right. And I think I want to believe that also when you involve children in doing the house chores, they gain a sense of responsibility and it gives them the confidence. You know how I always say charity starts at home, and I feel like if you have home and your parents are affirming you and teaching you, when you get to formal learning, it's much more easier for the kids to almost just take instruction from the teacher and get running with it. Thank you so much to everyone who participated. You can keep writing your comments in the chat and we'll come back to them as we go. Right now, I want to direct this question to Linda. As the ECD programming evolves and changes, and it becomes evident that parents and caregivers need to be involved in their child's early learning, what does evidence or studies show? Has there been a change since 2022 to now in a sense of the pattern of parents now engaging with their children more, because now almost the work setup has changed? Some parents are now working remotely full time, or they have the option of hybrid model. Has that affected how parents are now involved in early learning?
Yeah, so I think, you know, first of all, we know that the most important support is caring and loving parents. And we also know really that parents do want the best for their children. But what we are finding out a lot is that parents often think that learning only takes place at school. There are quite commonly held ideas that, you know, you shouldn't really talk to children or read to anybody under the age of 2, when we've just seen that that's when, you know, the brain is absolutely bursting with nerve connections. So it's just really providing support and knowledge and practical ideas for parents to know what to do, that is actually aligning better with the schooling experience that the child is going to have. So yes, you'll always see more of a focus on building up your child to behave well in public and be a responsible person and kind to others, that sort of character building. But it may not align very well with the sorts of demands that a child starts to get into when they go to school.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We can definitely tell that there is value in having programs like Bapaleng that seek to support caregivers and parents. However, some parents struggle with gaining access to resources that they can use at their homes to teach their children. And with the increased use of technology, I think some parents would be able to get those resources. They just don't know where they would get them. Ribu, can you tell us a little bit? I know we've touched on it before, but just to emphasize, what are some of the free resources that are available online that the parents can get? For instance, for today's World Read Aloud Day, when you go on the web online and you Google it, there's so many resources that are free from Twinkle, from the government, that say you can just download, print, or you can use them online. So what are some of the resources that we have as Bapaleng with our local implementing partners that parents can just collect and do these things at home in their own time?
Great, thanks, Millicent. I think firstly, to your question about access and some parents being unable to perhaps access certain information or programs such as Bapaleng the localities, we've recently launched the Bapaleng app, which is quite an exciting addition to our program offering. And really the intention of the app is to expand and help us maintain this wide network of parents and caregivers that we have engaged with and who have participated in our program, so that we don't lose them along the way and we keep them engaged and informed. But also it is a tool that we would like to use to support them to access this information you refer to. So whether that is content on nutrition, early literacy, storybooks, we have a host of good partners that we work with who have great material. And I think the platform will also assist us in sharing some of these resources with our parents. And the app really is also there to provide insights into our implementation activities to our community. So where we have ALWs, for example, if a parent is registered on the app and they would like to attend or invite someone in their community, they can get notified on where these are taking place in their community, etc. So this, again, like I said, is quite an exciting addition to the Bapaleng program, and we look forward to having everyone register and really engage with the app. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And where can we find the new Bapaleng app?
So the website for the app, or the what is it called? The address is bapaleng.co.za. I think maybe Stuan can help us with just typing it in the chat, and everyone can have it copied on the clipboard. Please, I urge everyone who's here to register and interact with the app, and also to share it. More than that, share it with your friends, families, anyone who's a parent or a caregiver, because we will really appreciate feedback on it as well. And like I said, it's to expand our community of caregivers.
All right. Thank you. We are almost at the end of our discussion, and we have another poll. But I think before getting to the poll, I want the audience to engage us. We need to hear what they think on school readiness. Do they have any methods that they have used as parents and caregivers to be engaged in early learning? And what are they doing that they can share with us? And we can also share with the public, because it's really important that we create platforms and we share these resources and techniques. And they might be old school techniques, but they might work. As a young mom to someone who just started grade 1, I felt very much not prepared for school. And with her coming to home every day with all these homeworks and all these readings, I had to go online to check for these techniques. But I do know that some of you have used these techniques and have tried them before. Please share in the chat box, and then we can move the conversation forward before we get into our last poll.
Melissa, I just say something quickly. I think one of the things that I'm sure contributes to the success of your Bapaleng project is the fact that you also providing a support for parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that they actually, through the home visits or when they get together in the workshops, they're not alone. And that's a really important thing in building the confidence of parents, because I think that parents are confident, you know, that they know what to do caring for children, but I don't think they're confident when they get into this learning through play space. Thanks.
Struan?
Can I share the next poll?
Do we have any questions in the chat box before we go to the poll?
Not yet, just some more thoughts from Kamena, where she shares that these activities that the pictures are still on the screen, they can also help with fine motor skills and also just better understanding children is one of her reflections that parents and caregivers don't always understand. Maybe we think children are behaving in a naughty way, but they're just exploring their environment, and that's natural for their learning process.
All right, I think you can pop the poll if we don't have any questions or thoughts from our audience. The question on the poll is, what is the most important thing a parent can do to help young children learn and prepare them for going to school later on? The votes are coming in, and I see that the audience is leaning towards the same response. But let's just give it a few more seconds, and then we can conclude the poll results. While we wait for the results, a question just popped in my head. So what happens when your child is enrolled in school and you get reports from the teacher to say, I don't think the child is ready for grade 1, for instance? Then what do you as a parent or caregiver do in that instance? Do you pull the child out of school, or is it the point where you get a tutor or you get them extra classes? What would be the solution when you realize, or the teacher realizes, that the child is not necessarily prepared, be it social skills, be also the academic work required?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting question, Millicent. Actually, I was sharing with both of you that I had went to a similar discussion for my own 6-year-old who's in grade R now, and it actually is quite scary for many parents to hear that some of their children actually may not be ready as yet to progress to grade 1. But I think on that issue for me is looking at what support avenues are present to engage with parents. And also, I think it's quite important to sensitize parents to the fact that this observation is not a reflection at all on the capacity of the child or them, but it's about how do we work with the resources that are available to them to ensure that the child is at a place where they are deemed able to cope with formal schooling. And I say the resources available to them because it's not everyone who will have the means to get a tutor or extra help. Yeah, so we need to be very cognizant of that. Yeah, I think that's for me what's important.
Okay, Linda, what would you advise?
I think we do know that, I mean, one of the things that teachers and even ECD practitioners, if you are at an ECD center, one of their roles is to pick up on areas where children might need to be referred for further assessment at the clinic or whatever. And also we know that parents often feel very threatened by this, and particularly if they think there's a disability or delay, often people will say, but no, my grandfather was exactly the same, or Uncle X was. There's quite a lot of denial. I think if you aren't an anxious parent, I would actually ask the teacher is what they think you could do to help and what the area is, because one of the important things to get across is the children don't develop in the same way in every area. As Rebo said earlier, they might be very good at one thing and a bit behind on another, and that is perfectly normal, and it will even up later on. So I don't know where you get to reassure them, but I think I don't think we should minimize the potential also of a program like this one to actually pick up and refer people if there's a worry about a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a lot to think about. So the poll results are in, and let me just repeat the question before I go into the answers. What is the most important thing a parent can do to help young children learn and prepare them for school? And a lot of the parents, or audience rather, 75% of them said be warm and caring and make time to talk and play. And 19% said buy them educational toys, and 6% said teach them their letters and their numbers. Linda, what do you have to say based on the results that you got?
Very happy to see the results.
Yeah, they're very interesting.
No, I'm very, very, very pleased, because it's numbers 2 and 3 are extremely common beliefs, and we know they're not true. You don't have to formally instruct children, and videos on your phone are absolutely not going to teach children very much at all. I think on the education toy thing, I think there are many toys which aren't particularly helpful, and they can play with natural environment things easily, or household things. But there are certain things like having access to books, having access to particular kinds of things like puzzles and stuff. If you can't borrow them at a toy library or improvise them, are helpful in particular kinds of skills. So I'm delighted to see that.
Yeah. Thank you so much to everyone that participated. This concludes our webinar on school readiness. I hope as the audience you have learned a lot as much as I have, and that you will be open to sharing what you learned, and let's foster this community where we are. Sorry?
Millicent, sorry to interrupt you. We did get some questions in just right now.
Okay,
so,
no, let's answer the questions. We still have a few more minutes. We can answer the questions before I wrap up.
So one question is from Numfundo, and she asks, how do community and family support systems vary between rural and suburban environments in terms of their impact on school readiness? So just to repeat, how do rural and urban environments in terms of family support impact school readiness? And then another question from Becky. Is there a quick method to check the readiness of a child for school?
Okay.
Thanks.
Those are quite interesting questions.
Very.
Yeah, I think the first one, by Nomfundo, I think the landscape of, our rural communities is such that because they are still quite traditional in how they parent, I think there is better, and these are assumptions, by the way, there is a better quality in engagement and relationships as opposed to children perhaps in the suburban areas where, they're exposed to quite a lot of information from various sources. And we also know that, you know, in these areas, a lot of parents, as Linda also pointed out earlier, are quite busy because a lot of parents in the suburban areas are working. There's distances to travel to and from home. So you might find that they are spending less time interfacing with their children. And that obviously, I think, like we had pointed to, is, you know, one of the key things in building or preparing a child to be school ready is the quality of the relationship with the parent, how much time is spent, you know, what is being done with the child during this time that is spent with them. Because in some cases, our parents will sit on the phone and the child is next to them and they call that interaction. It's not. So I think that would be how I surmise the impact that is on school readiness between those two distinct areas. I hope that provides somewhat of an answer. Linda, I don't know if you have anything on that
I just
question.
wanted to add that in, you know, in urban rather than suburb, in peri-urban particularly, there are many single parent households with terribly stressed out parents who are really trying to make ends meet and having to be everything. And I think that definitely impacts on their capacity to be responsive and warm and to get engaged with their children. So, I mean, that is something we came up with a lot in the UNICEF study, where people were saying, you know, that they were actually just too stressed. There was no social fabric to support them. So I think that would obviously be one of the environmental factors, just to add on what you've already said, Rebel.
All right. Do we have any more questions, Stuart?
We want to just talk about the checking readiness. I think we just need to be a bit cautious there, and maybe just, I don't know whether we can, when we send out whatever's going after this, just do a little list, not of like a screen, but to say these are the areas where people should be trying to develop their children rather. I hope that's probably not very satisfactory, but I think we don't want a whole lot of people out there assessing children's readiness unless they are actually experts at it.
Yeah, and I think perhaps maybe to add to that, Linda, is, you know, at the preschool age is a lot of, I mean, even for children in early learning programs, a lot of the assessment is done through observation. So there isn't really a checklist that you tick and say this child is ready in this area or no. And I would encourage parents as well, you know, on the topic of resources, to also place through the National Curriculum Framework, which provides sort of a guideline on some of these areas and what you look out for in a child who is developed or still needs support in certain areas. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Kamena, I see you raised your hand.
Millicent, thanks. Kamena shared a point
Okay.
that to follow up on the previous discussion, in what ways could we bring back more community-based caregiving to support stressed out parents? And then there's also a comment to say that Piwo really agrees with Rebo, and we need to, it's really about parents to support their children and the kind of relationship they establish, involving them in the house chores and building trust.
Okay. I think we will definitely look into having a follow-up to just keep the conversation going and sharing these resources and programs that exist to help parents and caregivers to not feel helpless or to feel like they're left alone in preparing the child for school. We will rope in people and stakeholders that are knowledgeable and can give us practical skills and resources on how to do this. And in closing, we'll have a poll up just to gauge our audience, but I would just like to say to you guys, thank you so much for joining us for this. And I really hope that you have learned as much as possible, and let's not leave it at this. Parental involvement is imperative. Let's encourage one another to build and foster active parenting to give our children a good start in their learning careers. And thank you so much for being here. Let's just see the check-in to see if you found this session helpful.
Millicent, perhaps whilst the poll is up, I just wanted to check with you because the background of this webinar is actually that Linda supported us with writing a nice piece on this topic, an op-ed. And I just want Millicent, maybe you can share on where our audience can engage further with that piece, just to keep this conversation going as well. Thanks.
All right, so the op-ed will be out. We'll have it on our official Seriti website, www.seriti.org.za, and then you'll also find it on our LinkedIn as an article. And we in LinkedIn, we are Seriti Institute NPC, and you also find it in your mailbox if you are subscribed to receive Seriti newsletters. And if you are not, Stuart is going to add a link in the chat box, and you can subscribe and get yourself the op-ed. The op-ed pretty much covers what we spoke about and more. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going also on LinkedIn. If you have any thoughts after the session, you can post and tag us on all social media platforms. We are Seriti Institute NPC. You'll see our green logo there, and we'll be happy to engage with you further. So the results are in, and everyone is saying they found this session helpful. We scored 100%. We scored 100%. They are glad to have joined us and learned what we had to share. And I think this marks the end of our session. We will have follow-ups. Please be on the lookout on our social medias. That's where we share as to when the next one is coming. And we do like getting topics from the audience because it means they've learned something, but they want us to speak a little bit more on it on a separate webinar, which we are more than happy to do. So thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay, alrighty.